Aloha, my name is Kelohi Lanileleo, best known as Kelohi, and this is my culminating task, called Beyond the Test. So here are the contents that we'll be going through, in brief form or quickly through, where we're going to go through the assessment plan, some progressions and formative assessments. Then we're going to look at the summative and how it's best to be revised. Then possible feedback methods, and then a story based on the student. And so here we go. So based on the assessment plan, before I go deep dive, I have to give you a little context behind the Beyond the Test. Beyond the Test is inspired by the current unit that I'm in with my student in my geometry class. So right now we're in a unit for transformations. Even though we're not on break, but they've been working on it since right before break. So we have a little context, a little bit more. Um, at the end, of course, due to my school and due to the way that my math department runs and the way that our school grades based on standard-based grading, of course, right now, the best way for math is a post test, like an actual post test, like your multiple choice test. Um, and typically in a unit, it'll be taught by me, of course, and the different lessons. So I would have had like four, five, six different lessons created by me because I would have to teach the students transformations based on translation. So how to move a shape side to side, front and back, rotating, what does it look like when it turns 90 degrees to 180, all those different things, reflection over the X and Y axes, or even just over a certain point. Um, or a combination of these different transformations, and also symmetry. Typically, most units are run by teachers. However, this unit, due to the simplicity of the unit, and I really wanted to make sure that my students were engaged this unit, I decided, and I have decided this since last year, so it's not my first time doing this, but it's my first time to really make sure that I'm organized a little bit better or thinking about all the different parts and revising it all. And this is where we have the supplemental assessment. Because I understand that with my students, their post test is not always the greatest, or sometimes they feel like they're not ready for it. And so what I created was a student led unit where instead of me doing all of these different lessons, I students broke themselves up into groups by being able to choose which position or even which group they wanted to be in according to the requirements and all those different things. And so, yeah, so each student has a specific vocab word that they have to focus on the rules, the regulations, all those different things, concepts, and they're building their lessons. Um, they're slowly building it. So right now we're in when we go back to school, they'll be building it or finalizing it at least, or so I hope. Um, but they have been so far in the biggest parts of lesson planning at the least. And then in like a week after we come back, they'll start teaching it. So I'm excited for that. And so here we go. So the learning outcomes that I was focusing on, even though I knew content had to be in there, but because I knew that content didn't matter if my students didn't understand the key concepts of what I'm looking for. So, I mean, obviously, content matters. So that's why they have to have some kind of content mastery where learners will demonstrate a deep understanding of their assigned geometric transformation. And of course, we're going to see it successfully in their teaching concept to their peers. Instructional design. Was your lesson a clear and engaging one? I challenge my students to where it's like you have to have some kind of engagement. You cannot just do, oh, here's the lesson, do a worksheet for 20 minutes and that's it. It's like, no, okay, we're gonna do a worksheet. Are they in groups? Are they coming back together as a class? What are we doing? What are we doing with the worksheet? They're not just gonna do a worksheet and that's it. And it has to be some kind of to where students can really understand. And the key concepts I'm looking for will be the opening, some kind of activity in the middle, like with the lesson, what is there, and then how are they going to check for understandings amongst their classmates? Communication, was the presenters or the teachers, student teachers, clearly presenting mathematical concepts and instructions using appropriate vocabs and visual aids? Like, was it clear enough and communicated enough for student level thinking? Collaboration. One thing that I did was, and that I'm very like proud, is that I actually kind of made it like a business where instead of I took myself out of the role of being the teacher, I made them the teachers. But how I did it was I did it in a business style where I was like the CEO of a company, and you're gonna see that it's very soon as you go a little bit more. Um, and each group was a team, an expert team. And so while they were in their expert teams, did they work effectively with their team? Was everybody doing their jobs? Was everybody doing their roles? So like we had project managers, resource specialists, and a couple other ones that I'm gonna talk about a little bit later to achieve the common goal of, did we teach the lesson the way we wanted to? And then the resource creation. I wanted them to start creating, to get a little bit creative on resources. When they were creating their slides or what creating however they're going to teach, was it accurate? Was it supportive? Was it actually helpful? And so that's the five learning outcomes that I really was emphasizing to my students. Is like, hey, in each step, I try to make sure, like, yes, you're gonna learn the content, of course, obviously. But as you're learning the content, now think of ways, what was your struggle? And based on the questions and struggles, start building your instructional design and communicating that. The way you're going to communicate is you're going to have to be able to collaborate. And in while you're doing all of this, what research did you do to really help your lesson? And so these are the five things that I really focus on. I'm going to get deeper into how I either formative assessing these things or where we are right now. And so the progression right now, so content mastery right now, learners will demonstrate a deep understanding of their assigned geometric transformation by successfully teaching their concept to their peers. So in the three steps that I have for this one, explain the core concept. Step one, you have to be able to explain the core concept and property of their assigned transformation. So what I did for that part was my students were introduced to the post test, and I gave each group specifically their section of the post test so that way they could use it into guiding questions for discovery, for their discovery. It's like based on those questions, what are you thinking about? What are you trying to figure out? All those different things. And it's like, what do you think you need to know about these things? And so it's kind of like using those things of like looking at the end, but also using it in the beginning to where it kind of makes them like think about it and it's like, oh, okay, let me make sure that while I'm doing this step, I now have to understand the rules. I now have to understand that the rules that I need to apply for the test, I need to make sure that I am incorporating and learning it. And so that's where our DK, sorry, this was week three, where it goes into step two, where the DK3, apply the transformation rules to solve all assigned tests correctly. And so, yeah, using that same test, now it's creating the answer key to work the solutions for their assigned problems. And so the two, step one and two was kind of like a combined asset of it. For me to really work with the students, the content really was where I needed to step in because I knew my students had to go in, each individual group had to understand it. And the way I did it was like, okay, what's the questions you have for me? Now, based on the questions, let's go try to solve it. Let's go look for the rules. Let's go do this and then create the key for it. And then from there, what's going to be very, what's eventually going to happen when they teach it is they're going to actually teach the concept. And that's gonna how I'm gonna be doing that is do the primary assessment of my observations in the final presentation and even in their practices. and all those different things. Because they have to really make sure that what they're doing is clear and understandable so that way all students feel heard and seen. And so now we get into our whole instructional design section. And the way I started that instructional design was the part where they had to translate mathematical language into plain language explanation for their peers. And how I did that was I had them start out with an outline. Um, their lesson plan outline or their lesson plan um idea, this big idea. Like, hey, now that you have your groups together, what is the big concepts that you have to look for? What are these little things? And it's all those little things that I have to ask them and be like, do you understand your part? Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand the rules and regulations? And so that's how I did that. For my assessment through Google Form. And then we're starting to do, and then the next time we did the lesson plan outline. So yeah, there was a lesson plan guide through a Google form and then a lesson plan outline. So that way they start thinking about these things. And then we started to construct it a little bit, detailed lesson plan to where they start constructing where they're actually building their lessons. This is the phase that they're in right now. This step two of the instructional design of where they're actually going to build their lessons, but they did complete the guide. The guide was also another Google form for me to just see and catch the observation of it all. And the reason why I even used it is because it helped me figure out whether or not my teams were on task. It helped me figure out whether or not my students understood a our concept or is there a lot of misconceptions and where I could just come in and kind of like work with that group. And it kind of helped me which group was on task and which group I needed to be a little bit more supportive. And so, and it really helped me pace the day or even the week. So that was kind of like those things. And also too, it kind of made them think about ways to like how in the end would they want to do that. And so again, that's where the teacher observation will happen and all these things. And then we get into communication. So in communication, we are starting to like this is the part that they're in. I would say right now in their phases as they're building their lessons, getting ready to teach it. This is where we are. It's not that you know your concept, not that you understand the content, not that you as a team can work together on it. Can you communicate it? And so what's going to be happening is when they come back, they're going to do a translate the task. Um, I mean, that's what we somewhat did in the beginning with content mastery of when translate the task, but I want them to translate it even more. To the point that like, can you where they get a little bit more practice, especially when they're going to do their teaching, it's like, hey, what do you want your students to do? What do you want your classmates to do? What do you want them to actually do? And kind of get them ready for these questions that because my thing is going to be when they're teaching, I step on the side and really I'm just an observer. I want them to really get hands on of understanding that you're going to have to explain this to your friends. You're going to have to explain this to your classmates. Do you know how to do this? And so whether it's be the assigned questions, whether it's going to be practice problems, can you translate that? Can you put it in simple terms for all learners? And that's something that I'm going to have to work with them because I know a lot of them do not know that sometimes their friends are actually in special education or that they are an English language learner. And English is not their first language. And even though they speak English very well, so it's kind of those kind of things that I will have to think about. And then next is when they're rehearsing with me, are they presenting to for clarity, timing, and flow? Are they spending too much on this? Are they spending a little, and you need to spend a little bit more on that concept? Because one thing about this is that they have the whole class time. And the class time is 80 minutes. And that's one thing that I told each group was like, you have 80 minutes. It's up to you if you want to use it or not. But if you're going to be quick about it, you need to make sure you have the time filled you doing other things. Um, if your lesson's going to be really quick, well, then you better make sure that this class has a lot of practice on it. If you're going to take long in lecturing, it's like, when do they get to have practice? And so it's teaching them the balance and communication that not only are they going to be talking, but also you need to listen and hear the confusion, recognize the confusion. And this will be working with me on for the formal assessment. It will be me working with them. They're gonna be being observed by me and or a peer team member. Might be from another team, those kind of things. So yeah, that's literally what's gonna happen. And then of course, DOK4 is on the real time. Um, are they able to answer questions? Are they able to be ready for those kind of things, to re-clarify a lot of things and really recognize this is what teachers do. And so that's the whole point of this concept is like, do you understand what we do every day? And so that's one thing I want to see is them adapting to the presentation in real time by effectively answering audience questions. And that would be me observing them and seeing how they answer it. And then of course, if they get stuck, this is where I come in and, put on my teacher hat and step in, kind of like a boss, like how bosses step in for their managers and be like, hey, we're here. And even though it's gonna be interesting, but I also know it's gonna be a little stressful for my students, but I definitely believe in them and that they can do this. So collaboration. This one was a little bit more this one definitely started from the very beginning. The first thing they did was identify and accept a specific role and its responsibilities. And so they had to go through, after the groups were made, then it was like, hey, figure out your big ideas. While they were getting introduced to the concept, we had to already establish, all right, who is who in this team? Who is going to be the project manager, the one that I need to communicate with the most? Who's going to be the research specialist? Who's going to be this presentation lead? Who's going to be this quality inspector? And so those are the things that, those are the four main roles that I do have in each group. And of course, some groups are five, but of course, it's just sharing a role, whole leading in that role. But one thing I emphasized with students was, okay, just because you're in this role does not mean you do not help throughout the whole project. You don't just wait till you are relevant in in the group work. It's like, no, you're doing the little task, you're doing all these things because again, it's to teach them again. The underlying goal is for them to understand that teachers do all this every single time. We are the multiple roles. We sometimes are the quality inspectors while we also still manage everything, while we're still making sure we are the research specialists or we go to somebody that is this for us. And so it's these different things. Next is executing it. This is again, how I see me formally assessing this is, and I've been doing it is like, while I'm watching them when they're working together, it's like, okay, project manager, are you keeping time and everything on schedule? Or is your group falling apart? Is your group not doing the task of the day? Is your group, did they finish this part? And the research specialist is like, hey, are you making sure that everybody's getting the resource that they need? That all these different things. Presentation lead, it's like, you may not be presenting right now, but are you helping? Quality inspector, are you making sure that everything your team is putting down is accurate and clean and understandable? So it's these different things that I just make sure I'm observing and I'm watching and just really, and if I see a team who is lacking, I do go talk to them a little and be like, hey, what's going on? Like I try to get some feedback through some conversations with them. And so it's just like those little things. It's more hands-on formative assessing rather than through a Google Docs. But that's what our DK4 is, where the evaluating of the team overall effectiveness and individual contributions. So that way it's a confidential peer evaluation and self-reflection submitted to a Google form after the project. just to kind of one, it gives me a little bit more feedback on, hey, did it work well, or should I adjust myself? Should I do better? Or what worked, what didn't work? And also too, it's like, maybe the next time we do this kind of project, maybe we won't want to be in the same group. But that it's kind of like making them rethink. Because some of them I know, like when they first did this, when they chose their groups, they kind of was choosing with their friends, and then they realized their friends don't do things, or they don't want to do the expectation that is expected of them, and it makes them really reflect on that kind of thing. And then we have our resource creation. First off, they have to brainstorm and sketch draft versions of materials. Um, so during the building of the lesson plan outline, when it was lesson planning, they had to do a materials brainstorm submission, with their outline. Where because it asks them like, what materials do you need? What material, and in their guide for lesson building as well. It's like, what materials do you need? Do you need computers? Do you need laptops? Do you need this? Do you need that? Are you gonna need the whole classroom? Are you gonna need whiteboards? Are you gonna need all these different things of like letting me know, like, hey, what are you gonna need? Oh, do you need me to print out things? And so like it's just these different things of making sure that the students understand that, hey, if you're gonna want something, or you want a game or create a game, you're gonna have to create it. You're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to do these things. If you're gonna play Jeopardy, hey, make sure you have the Jeopardy out layout template, or an actual site, or something like that. Then when it came to create a complete and accurate set of instructional materials, this is the part as we get closer to um this finalization week. It's like, hey, do we have everything? Is everything in their final drafts of worksheets, slides, everything? Is everything accurate? Is it visual aids? Is there enough understanding on these things? And making sure that it's visual enough so that it meets students, especially for the special education students, it meets their um, accommodations. And that's one thing I'm doing very silently, is making sure there is accommodating a lot of accommodations in this, and small tasks, but also to making sure that students think about other students. It's like, hey, you like when I put visuals, so why are we not putting visuals? Why are we just putting a bunch of words? Why are we not doing this? It's like making sure that things that student support needs, or things that I make sure is there, in their version, what does that look like? And then of course, one thing that I would like to see is a justification on why they chose that material, or that resource, or that practice problem. It's like, what made it special enough for you to choose it? That way they start thinking about, like, also it's a little decision making. Is like, why did I choose that? Why did I choose that? Was it helpful? Was it beneficial? Or was it, let's never do that again? And so it's kind of those different things. And so um that's something that I'm gonna add to a final reflection question in the end. That like, hey, were you pleased with the resources you chose? And then also too, it's like another thing would be like, what advice do you have for the next groups, for my next year's kids, or the next time that we ever do something like this? Will be some resources, some grows and glows on that. And so this is what we already have in progress. And so this is what it started off with. Heavenly Brightness Enterprise. So like I said, I treated it like a business. It was like literally like an application where I was like, hey, welcome. This is our vision to illuminate the path to success. And then like acting like it was a whole special initiative to ensure that every member of our team shines brightly on the upcoming Unit 4. Like kind of getting them ready for that. And then how we can do that is we're gonna have 5 expert teams, and I'm gonna need your talents. I'm also gonna need your passions, because I really wanted them to understand that this is your unit. This is not me telling you what to do. This is your way of to shining. And I know students are. It's something that has to be undone a lot, because especially in math class, you don't get a lot of like, oh, it's us, or they don't see how their talent matches math. And that's the one thing that is gonna have to keep doing often, is to show them and realize like, hey, no, math is connected in what you enjoy. It's just you have to bring that out. And so yeah, so that was the first, very first. This is how the groups were made. Then we got into once the groups were made, then it's like, okay, what's your big idea based on, translation? Hey, what's the big idea about translation? What are some key important informations? What are some brainstorm activities or engagements you want to do? And these are the roles right here. This is how they understood where, based on which role they wanted. Like they understood that the project manager is the team organizer and timekeeper. Their job is to make sure that the team has a clear plan, everyone has a task, and that the team stays on schedule. Research specialist was the charge of all materials. They design it, they help design it, or at least lead the design, or give every delegate the task. Presentation lead. They're the main ones that during rehearsal time, during actual speaking time, they're the ones who are actually leading it and making sure the team is truly ready for all of it. And then of course the quality control inspector was like the fact checker, or and the team editor. So like making sure that everything is true and right and correct. And sometimes that means checking in with me. So yeah, so each of these have their roles, all the things. So this is how we kind of started. Some of these lead to different days, but like this was day one, this was one day, and this is another day type of thing. And then we got into our lesson planning. So of course, this is again in progress. Um, this one is based on one of the symmetry teams because I have three different classes. So this is one of my teams based on symmetry. So they're like learning target. By the end of our lesson, students will be able to find hidden and shown symmetry patterns and be able to analyze if a shape is or isn't symmetrical. Like that's a great start for they understand that when it's time for them to teach, this is the lesson that target that or the learning target that they need to meet and um understand like, hey, your class, you need to make sure that everything you do meets this target. And this was them for them to understand that based on the post test where they're at. So it's kind of for them to know what numbers they were at on the post test because then it's like, oh, okay, let's think about it. And when they look at it, they're making sure that that's what they're teaching upon and not so much just going off gear. Because especially with symmetry, you can go easily left field, but it's like these four numbers really keeps them in track. The next one is the big idea. What if one thing, like making sure it's clear, understood by your students, and then so this is what they have to, this is what they wrote, and then part two was something that you want to do. So like for them, they're gonna do some kind of like pre-cut activity with physical models of symmetry. That's what they're thinking, and then also vocab worksheets. So yeah, so this is for them. This is something that they're starting to write out and everything. I still think about it. Like them, they're thinking about doing a video also on symmetry. So it's like, making them feel like, hey, I'm actually in charge of all of this. And so that's where we're at right now. This is based on the progress, based on like a whole week actually. It's been only a week or so when they first got introduced with this. So um and there's so it's really good progress considering that these are students and not teachers. But I know we're gonna do more and we're gonna see more. So I'm excited for this coming up week when we go back to school. So with that being said, let's get into a summative assessment revision. So as Rush said, Unit 4 was this is Unit 4. This is the post test right here. This is the post test. This is literally what it was. This was the rubric. This was everything. Like, okay, based on scores, all those different things. But honestly, when looking at this, it's pretty scary, especially for students. Um, I mean, of course, when we think about it, it was hitting the whole DAK1 and DOK2 a little, but and aligned with the core content standard for the unit. However, there's a whole lot of missing, right? Especially when you think of stuff like that. It didn't really allow higher level skills develop. Yeah, that was not developing like in comparison to the project. And it lacks a significant DOK3 and DOK4. Like there's nothing beyond recall and application. However, changing time for that. What did that change look like? one thing that is going to be happening, I normally do this too, but with this one being the way it's being structured with the project, um, students are going to be allowed to use open notes. However, they are only able to use it based on pure content. It's not like, oh, let's look at the textbook. Let's look at this. It's like, no, based on, and also too, it's a way to, it's another formative assessment to say, did the team that taught this section teach it well? And so, and it makes them think about it a little more and thinks about things. Also, too, they will be able to do corrections, like after your test and everything like that. But how I'm gonna do it is that you're gonna have to correctly cite which expert group did this section and did they teach it? Again, because it's another formative assessment of did the group that taught it teach it well, or even taught it at all? Did they cover it? And so that's also another thing. Another one is adding a learning reflection at the end of the test. So after they take it, then they're gonna do a whole learning reflection and be like, hey, based on taking that test, based on your learning experience, like how was it? How did it work? Did it work well? Did it not work well? What could have been improved? All these different things. And probably the learning reflection also might be, who knows, might be at the end, um, might be before the test. Who knows? I'm still thinking about these things when I should do that so that way I can kind of see it and making sure that like is everybody ready kind of thing. So some feedback methods that's going to be happening throughout, or that is happening throughout, that I would like to highlight is teacher conferencing. That's the biggest one with me. Every single time we reach a milestone, so like lesson planning, any group that's behind lesson planning, I'm gonna go work with them and be like, hey, checking in, what's going on? And then they'll hear some glows and grows, and then based on their lesson plan. Okay, cool. No, there's some glows and it grows. All right, here we go. Another one is peer feedback through their presentation, um, during rehearsals and all those things. And so one thing that they enjoyed while they're rehearsing, one thing could be better. And it be from a peer that's not in their group because, one, to get everybody involved, two, to hear from a different perspective. And who knows, even though they might see a little choppy version of it, they might see it become better. And so they might see some improvement. So that's the hope for that. But also to on the test side, on unit post test, because it is mandatory again, you know, while we're making corrections, maybe we'll have some peer teaching corrections where not only citing the groups that taught, but also working together to figure out why they got it wrong. Where it's like a mini reteach, a mini re-lesson. And it's like, okay, maybe this group has to reteach it, or maybe somebody else who understood that group can be able to reteach it in a sense that breaks it down even more. And so that's what's going to be happening on feedback, and that's what it will look like in my class. And so the reason why for all of these things is because, so even though I'm using a name that is real, the student that is representing Amber, it's not, is not the name of the actual student. So Amber's story is Amber is a verbal communicator. She takes on leadership naturally, even though at times she may not feel as confident or anything like that. But when she is confident, she is naturally a leader. And I love the way this girl thinks. She organizes in her thinking and she always sees the big picture, especially with the questions she asks me, the way she wants to organize and making sure she understands everything. She has that strength to really make sure she knows what she needs to do and her task. However, she struggles in some areas, which is she has anxiety. Um, Especially when overwhelmed with content. I've seen it in other units with her that when in the usual, sometimes it's like she'll check out because she's just overwhelmed. So she'll start drawing and different things, and then it it's not until I do a one-on-one with her or I tell her like, hey, Google Classroom has all the notes. And then she'll just do it at her own pace kind of thing. She does take time to process the content, um, longer than the average student, but it's okay because that's how I kind of work in my class too. It's like it's in your own content process, but it's like also still want to go with the timing of it all. And but also too, one thing I noticed is traditional testing makes the student feel trapped and doesn't show her true potential. Because I know when I would work with her one on one and all these things and we talk about it, it's like cool. Like this girl can explain to me what the unit is and how to do it all. But then when it comes to like, okay, here's the test, she kind of shuts out or she's kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know what this means anymore. And so those are the things. And so I chose Amber because one, I feel like this revision of the summative or the revision of Unit 4 will help her confidence and knowledge gap come together. And to where it's like the confidence that I know she has and the knowledge that I know she's gonna get is gonna close closer together. And also too, I know she's a struggling on paper student, yet when she's discussing with peers or discussing even with me, she excels in these things. So I really feel that this will help her in a sense of coming out of her shell. And so my hope is that um it allows creativity and even more leadership, and she can truly demonstrate mastery in the content that she's going to teach with her group. One thing that I'm very proud of Amber is that she's a project manager. Actually, she runs the group, so that's love to see that her leadership is already excelling, and that she's really making sure her team's on task and that they are doing the points that they need to do. And her group is actually one of the ones that has been staying on task, even though at times it was stressful for her, but she's really doing it. And she's really communicating with me. She's communicating with her team. Her communication strengths are very stronger. And also too, I'm seeing the closing of the gap between on paper and real time. And what my hope is that when it comes to all the other sections, when her classmates are teaching, that it's also closing that same paper and real time um gap as well. So that's the reason why I chose the way to do Unit 4 is because students like Amber, students like many of my other ones, my special educations, my ELLs, this one allows them to see the unit in a chunk, in a section, and really work with peers and other students that possibly could go through the same struggle because my groups are mixed. Not all of them are special education, or not all of them are just level one students or level 5 student, like really high thinking students. Some of them are like mixed, had mixed groups, and some of them, yeah, even though they're mixed, there are low thinkings, but they all each have their different strengths. And so that's what my hope is for my class in general is that it all eventually works out in the end. And so that's my comedy task on how I went through Unit 4. And so I just want to say thank you and aloha.